Testing 1 2. Testing 1 2. Yes, it is. For those online, we're getting ready to start. We're just making sure everything's working. Okay, we're about ready to start. For those online, if you're seeing the screen, we are on week 15. It's just the fact that when I created this PowerPoint, I always copy the week before, and I forgot to change 14 to 15 on this. So it's, please accept my apology. I'll recorrect that online. And there's one other update I got to get on there also. But we're about to begin. Everybody ready? Good nose inside on that. Last week we concluded with the fact, and I reiterate these things because it's a good foundation for you to continue to carry forward. Remember what we're doing and where we are. There were 613 commandments to implement the law. We learned about those. There's 365 thou shalt do, and there's 248 thou shalt nots. And the fact, so that's what we're learning. We're in the midst of the 365 thou shalt nots in there. We reaffirmed the covenant at Mount Sinai. If you remember Moses there, God reaffirmed the covenant that was first given to Abraham. It's been reaffirmed, and they're continuing on as the people, as they get ready to, they're still at Mount Sinai. They're learning all this. They're learning to become what it is to become God's people. God has given them the law, the principles, the 10 principles, and that's what we think of. You hear all the time the 10 commandments. Well, they're really the 10 principles. From them, we get to 613 laws, which 10 of them come from our reiterations of those 10 principles. But really, it's those principles are what is defining to become God's people. These are the principles in which you need to live by if you're going to become my people. And then from this, now they're further going down to help understand what it is to live by these 10. It starts getting down into detail from there. We have instructions. We've learned how to build the tabernacle, and we've learned how detailed that is and what it is. When you get the numbers, you're going to learn how to take it down and put it back up. It's a fascinating thing when you read. And that's 25 to 40 is to rebuild putting the tabernacle together. We've learned about we began Leviticus and instructions how to use the tabernacle. You know, the five sacrifices that would be there, 4 by animal and 1 is the grain offering. So we learned about those. We learned about what the rules of the priesthood are. We witnessed what they are and the consequences of not living by them. And now we're learning about how to implement the law. Last week we got up to the point of what it was, why we cannot eat blood. So we've got to that point. And we always remember this point on, remember that I keep putting this in here, is for them, for the Israelites, you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. As we go on, we're going to see them struggle in the fact that that's what they're supposed to become. And every time they see a squirrel, they'll go this direction and that direction. But that's what God wants them to become. And God has given them all these things. This is how you're supposed to live. This is how you become my people. So let's jump in. Oh, you began a good this week, and this is we get into sexual relations. I want you to think as we begin, there's not one law you're reading in which the people weren't doing it. God would not need to give a law if they weren't doing it. So that's what you got to think. They have been, came out of Egypt for 400 years. There they are, and they are doing these things. So now that God's bringing them to become my people, you need to stop doing these things to be my people. And there's some tough things that they're teaching. The Lord said to Moses, "Speak to the Israelites and say to them, I am the Lord your God. You must not do as they do in Egypt. Forget what you used to do, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan." We will learn the land of Canaan does the exact same thing. This is a cultural thing taking place throughout that area. Remember, it's a polytheistic world. They worship different gods. They do sacrifices. They do sacrifices of children. They do all kinds of things. Do not follow their practices. You must obey my laws and be careful to follow my decrees. Why? Because I am the Lord your God. You will learn if you meet someone of a very orthodox faith in the Jewish faith. They may practice things specifically. They'll sit there and say, "Oh, I can't have seafood. I can't have shrimp. Oh, no pig, nothing like that." And you're going, "Well, it's all clean and everything else. It's okay. Other people eat it and stuff like that. Why don't you eat it?" Because God said so. That's a good enough answer. Why don't you do this? It's a good enough answer as today. Why don't we do so? Why don't you speak like everybody else? Well, get on the bandwagon. We can be bullies. We can talk bad. We can lie, cheat, and steal. No, God told me not to. That's why we don't do it. Because God is, I am the Lord your God. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. You think about it, that's why we say that prayer, and that's what teaches us. Keep my decrees and laws for the Lord, for the person who obeys them will live by them. I am the Lord, I am the Lord. Ugh. So now we jump into the good old sexual relations, you got to read all those. These are important because this is a closed community. I want you to think about that. They have left Egypt. There are now 2 million of them living close together. We'll learn how close that is when we get in the next chapter. When we get in Numbers, I'll show you how they're laid out and how they're all spread around that. 2 million people will live around the tabernacle. And the fact, you just can't do these kind of things and hope to keep a community that will work together. Because not, you'd be one continuous fight, one continuous battle, all these different things. No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord. You don't want pointy head kids, right? You don't want kids that you don't do that. You don't sleep with your family. And it has to go into detail. Do not dishonor your father by having sexual relationships with your mother. She is your mother. Do not have relationships with her. Do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would dishonor your father. Remember this? We have gone from partnership, Adam and Eve, to women becoming property. That transition has taken place. So if you didn't have a boy, I'm getting another woman. They would add. And they had concubines and everything else. The men would. Do not have sexual relations with your sister, either your father's daughter or your mother's daughter, whether she is born in the same house, home, or elsewhere. Whether stepdaughter, stepdaughter, do not. You do not. Do not have sexual relations with your son's daughter or your daughter's daughter. That would dishonor you. We keep, we're hearing about a lot of this. If you're married and you're doing this, it's adultery. Do not have sexual relations with daughter of your father's wife, born to your father. She is your sister. Do not have sexual relationship with your mother's sister, because she's your mother's close relative. Do not dishonor your father's brother by approaching his wife to have sexual relations. She's your aunt. They were doing this. Do not have sexual relationship with your brother's wife. That would dishonor your brother. Do not take your wife's sister as a rival wife and have sexual relationships with her while your wife is living. For a man to have taken on his wife's wife's sister, that's actually, you might as well just put a loaded gun in your hand. I mean, you're crazy. But people did that, etc. You don't take on another person in your family with that. Do not approach a woman to have sexual relations during her uncleanliness of her monthly period. Do not give any of your children to be sacrificed to Moloch. That's what they were doing, for you must not profane the name of your God. I am the Lord your God. Do not have sexual relationship of a man as one does with a woman. That is detestable. This is the one thing that every church has been struggling with. We see this world struggling with. We want to point to it and say, this is homosexuality. This is not what it's talking about. But it is, in the fact that there is no understanding of gender identity or sexual identity. There's none of that understanding at this point. These are practices taking place within the culture of their communities. Now, I know it's controversial. Up here on the altar, and I'll actually put it up on the stage, I have articles that I will share. An article that I was looking for something to help if anybody has questions. Walter Brueggemann is an internationally world-renowned biblical scholar. He's written over 145 books. Almost every seminary uses his books, etc. And there's a paper I have right here that you can read that he sort of walks you through how this has all changed and the struggle that we had in understanding how our biblical discourse and what we're understanding when we read later and other things, what it means in that transition. When we talk about the word homosexual did not become a word. It was the first time it was ever used, ever shared, was in a paper by Carl Kurtberry in 1868. And JC tells another date. It's 1868 when it was first identified. It wasn't until it was translated into English, because it was written in German, in 1892 that we began to see that word begin within medical journals, et cetera, begin to be shared. And that was talking about what the Chinese began to understand in the 12th century, that people are born, that there are people that have that feeling of love, their of a gender identity and also sexual identity, that who they connected with, et cetera, and understanding that this is not a choice. And that's what they're understanding. That's where that beginning of that understanding of where people struggle with that. So that's what it's there, and that's what Brueggemann will tell you, when we come down to we love each other. And that's the message of God, is to love one another. It's not, and the fact us to take care of each other. So, but it's there. It's been a discussion, and that's about the best way I can approach it. Just talk and get by it here, because we can point to Romans and et cetera. But Brueggemann walks through that and points to Paul, et cetera, explains things, et cetera. As we continue on, if you're reading the New Testament, you're reading everything out of order. If you read Paul in order, you discover Paul is constantly changing his understanding of things over time. He starts off one way and he ends another way. Because we read them out of order, we don't see that. We read the New Testament totally out of order, and we don't see some transitions taking place. So that's what we're reading. Typically our Bibles, our Hebrew Bibles, out of order, in the fact, because we're not reading Isaiah when we read Kings. We're reading Isaiah after Ezra. We're waiting all the way down to the end before we jump to it. So that's what you got to understand. So that's my... Any questions? Does that answer it pretty fair? Do not defile yourselves in any of these ways, because this is how nations that I am going to drive out before you become defiled. So he's telling them this, don't do this, because this is taking place in other nations. This is taking place in Egypt. We will learn if we get down and further in the fact that this takes place in the Roman Empire, in the Greco-Roman Empire. We see that these kind of practices, we'll see Caesars, et cetera, do the exact same things that we're reading about you shall not do. They're supposed to be the example and teach. So if the land's defiled for its sin, and the land, the inhabitants are going to be vomited out. But if you keep my decree and keep my laws, the native born and the foreigners residing among you, there's another point. Well, you must keep my decrees and my laws. The native born and the foreigners residing among you must not do any of these detestable things. For all these things were done by the people who lived in the land before you, and the land became defiled. And if you defile the land, it will vomit you out as it vomited out the nations that were before you. So sometimes you're going to, as you read, we go further in the Old Testament, in the story, we will see the Israelites many times be put into the diaspora. They'll be taken captives, brought into Babylon, etc. And sometimes when I read that, I wonder, because they did not do what God allowed them to be vomited out. So that's what you're going to face. When it talks, this is the New International Version, so it says foreigners, and many of your Bibles it will say aliens. Depends on your translation. And what do you do if an alien? An alien lives among you. They have all the same rights, etc. They are protected and everything else, just as a native-born person, as an Israelite, etc. So they're all treated the same. Strangers are different. Strangers are just passing through. But aliens, you treat, they have to remember they themselves were aliens at one time, and that's why God allowed them to be held in captivity. They know what it is to be mistreated as an alien in a country in which they're whipped and beaten, murdered, and mistreated, and all those things. They shall not do that to any alien who lives among them. They're supposed to treat them just like they would treat their own brother or sister. So he jumped into various laws. Speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, be holy because I am the Lord your God. I am holy. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed holy be thy name. We are supposed to be holy the same way, keeping God centered in our lives, walking in that path. Each of you must respect your mother and father, and you must observe my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God. Honor your father and mother. Do not turn idols to make metal gods for yourselves. We've already seen to do that one time. Now, there's a lot of things you read, and you recognize that God's laying within this how to take care of others. He has his own plan. God has laid a plan out for you. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap it to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God. This is a plan of caring for the poor. For those who went to Redbird, we learned a lot. One thing you learn there is that we used to just give things to people. We see it still going on today. People do that. We'll come and get a free coat, get this and that and everything else. And when you give. Now, we are giving food, and that's a little different. But we're not taking, when you start just give people things and say, here, you need this, you're taking away their self-esteem. We've learned by going there, when I started the nonprofit up in New Kent, we started the thrift store. Oh, we're just going to give the stuff to them. Well, we took them to Redbird, and they learned very quickly by allowing them to come and buy things, and so we had reduced prices. We would even give discounts up to 95% off. So you can go in, a person can go into the thrift store based upon their income, et cetera. They were given a grant, et cetera. They could go in there and they could still come out, walk out, stand in front of someone and say, look at the new outfit I bought. That gives them their self-esteem. It's not tearing them down. We have to recognize there's always some in all society that cannot take care of themselves the same as others. Some are more gifted than others. You have people that can do all kinds of things and people that have very limited capabilities. So this is a way of allowing them to keep their self-esteem, to keep their pride, and allow them, the field is there. We got everything we're going to get, and they could go and glean the remainder and provide for their family. So that's, I think, good. But we now give food out in the food bank in the fact, because we're not an agrarian society. I can't say, well, hey, glad you're here. Go out and glean the field out back. We don't have anything to glean. Go get some crickets. We know you can eat those, right? So, do not steal. Again, it says you shall not steal. Do not lie. Do not deceive one another. Do not swear falsely by my name, and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord. Maybe we need to put this in Congress, right? That's where it really belongs. Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Good grief, these are things you should think of, but we tolerate this so many times. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight. You should not give, false testimony. We have agencies now to protect people to get their wages, right? And where do we get that idea? Right where we're at. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. We're watching that in our own nation right now. People, if you have a lot of money, you can do a lot of things. And the poor person gets mistreated. We see that in our jails right now. That's why, as Methodists, we stand up for social justice, social principles, and we protest and go forth. We have people who are working towards that because these unfair practices taking place. Do not go about spreading slander among your people. Do not do anything that endangers your neighbor's life. I am the Lord. Think the chemical companies should learn that? When they've done things. Do not seek revenge or bear a grudge. We see that all the time. But keep my decrees. That's what, she's telling you the same things. You see a lot of different things there. We talked about this on Tuesday morning. Do not mate your different kinds of animals. Do not plant your field with two kinds of seed. So God has given. And do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material. I meant to look this up. I cannot totally answer why. We were coming to all kinds of things of why not, etc. The two kind of clothing you're going to have at that time is wool, and you're going to have plant-based cotton. So we were trying to, what was why? But, what's the answer? Why shouldn't I not do it? Because I am your Lord, your God. Right? So I think there may be some things in here to see, can you live by what I've asked you to do? If you're going to be my people, do as I say. Some things we don't think of today. We can't think about if a man sleep with a female slave, etc. So, but that's, we see that. Again, we see about not eating blood. Do not eat any meat with blood still in it. Do not practice divination or seek omens. Do not call 1-800-California for a horoscope person. Those people that are going to tell you, call me and I'll tell you everything you need to know about yourself, and I'll speak to the ghosts for you. Observe my Sabbaths and have reverence for my sanctuary. I am the Lord. Do we observe the Sabbath today? That's the thing. We don't. But this is they were going to be taught to observe the Sabbaths. And you got to think of any of these laws, they're going to put fences around them to, again, prevent from anybody from doing anything to even slightly represent that. When a foreigner, I put an alien, resides among you in your land, do not mistreat them. The foreigner residing among you must be treated as your native born. Love them as yourself, for you were foreigners in Egypt. I am the Lord your God. If we live by the law, we need to live by all of these, and this is why don't we live by that? So think about that. When people want to quote one law, why are we mistreating people? So that's why we come back to it. Do not use dishonest standards when measuring length, weight, or quantity. Use honest scales and honest weights. Be an honest epith and an honest hin. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. I put in here the fact that's why we had the Virginia Office of Weights and Measures. So when you go to the gas station, you pump gas, and it's flying in that. You put it on a hose, you put it on there, and it's going, spinning as fast as it can. As you pump it in, because you're putting it as high as you can to get it in the car. You sure hope that's 20 gallons you just paid for. That's why we have weights and measures of vary. When you go to the meat counter at Walmart, you want to make sure when they give you a package, you pick a package up, that's 4.6 pounds of chicken at $9 a pound. You want to make sure that's 4.6 pounds of chicken, right? You want to sit there and what do they weigh? Did they weigh it? I think there's an awful lot of water in here. They pour water in that. And you start wondering these things. You're sitting there going, well, that's what weight. And you back in the back. Their scales are measured. Food Lion scales they come and test those to make sure. Now, when you go to your doctor's office, probably your scale has not been tested. I know I have shrunk 6 inches since I've gone to the doctor in the last couple of years. I keep getting shorter, and I'm like, I go home, I'm the same height, and I go to the doctor's office. I'll soon be as tall as Kim. I mean, I'll be 5'2". And of course, she's not really 5'2" either, but the scale said I was. So that's what you want to make sure of. You jumped in and saw the punishments for sin and the fact into that. So we're not going to go through all of these on that, but we'll stop at a couple of them. Anyone who curses their father or mother is to be cut off, be put to death. Because they have cursed their father or mother, their blood will be on their own head. Anybody here curse their mother and father? Not, oh, you're not going to be honest, right? Not going to ever say, I ever said a bad word? I can't bring you out front and stone you. Oh, darn. You know, I mean, just bring one child out front, and you would, in front of a school, and you would never have any misbehaving ever again, right? Yeah. You said what? But this is one of Jesus' favorite laws to point back to. You know, why didn't you stone your child? You know, that's what you think about. We haven't done these. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, with the wife of his neighbor, both of the adulterer and the adulteress are to be put to death. I probably referenced it up here. You think of a New Testament story? Yeah, John, right? John chapter 8. We jumped to that, but Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn, so he's right there at Jerusalem. The Mount of Olives is right across from the temple. So it's down the valley and up. That's where it is. At dawn, he appeared again in the temple courts. So he came up from the Mount of Olives up to the main gates, up into the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" Well, he realizes it's a trap, right? Where's the man? Where's the man? They caught her in the act. Well, someone had to be there with her, because you can't have adultery by yourself. So that's why it says they were using this question as a trap. And in fact, but I want you to notice that we read that, so Jesus recognizes this. What's he do? Jesus, he's not, they dragging her, and she is, I'm sure, screaming. She knows what the punishment is. She is probably, I think, if you're committing adultery, what are you wearing? This morning it said, negligee. I don't think they had negligee. They didn't have, Victoria's Secrets wasn't there at that time. Yeah, let me go down to Victoria's Secrets in the City Mart and pick up a negligee. You know, she was probably if she had clothing on at all, it may have been something wrapped around her. They just drug her there. So Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. And we'll get into more of this when we get there. But I want you to think about this. When they kept questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Then he sat back down. Where's he looking? He's looking at them, right? At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time. The older ones at first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Women, where are they?" Is he looking at her? He's asking her, where are they? And she's the one who has to reply to him. "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" And she responds, "No one, sir." "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." Did he yell at her? Did he condemn her? No. He sent her on her way. And this is, again, as we read the Bible and understand, see the actions of Christ towards the sins of the people. There is a total transformation, and that's what Brueggemann's talking about when you get in there. That's a transformation of how the punishments are in the Leviticus, to what Jesus is bringing into the world, because what did he bring? He took away the power of sin. He's telling them he wants people to go and live and love thy neighbor as thyself. So that's what we see the transformation take. We see a little bit of the transformation take place. And again, we go on to all the fun things. Have sexual relations with your father's wife, he will be dishonored. If a man has sexual relations with his daughter-in-law, both of them to be put to death. Some pretty strict punishments right there. So there's, you either be put to death, or you're going to be put out. You're going to be put out of the community, be brought to the edge of the town, and say, go. And you can imagine you're not in the Sinai area. It's not like you're not at the edge of town of Gloucester, and say go across the bridge over into York County. You're at the edge of Gloucester, and there's nothing. It's like being in Texas. Have you ever been in Texas? You've been. I go to Amarillo. I used to go there all the time in El Paso and stuff. Amarillo, you drive to the edge of town, and all you saw was tumbleweed. There was nothing. There was nothing beyond. The road stopped. There was a highway going that way, and not a single thing you could see. And that's what this was. That's what this is exactly like. So leave. So we'll just keep going with that. Yeah, so the 1-800 number of those people out in California that you see advertised on TV, they're not following that law. We read the rules of the priests, and the priests had even some more stricter rules, etc., how they're supposed to live and how they're supposed to be. The priest must not keep himself ceremonially unclean for any of his people who die. So he's not allowed, except for a close relative. He's not supposed to be present there or be there with that. So we see that. Priests must not shave their heads or shave off the edges of their beards or cut their bodies. If you meet a Hasidic Jew, somebody who's Jewish, who's Hasidic, that you're seeing the ringlets coming down, they don't do that. You'll see them with their beards uncut. This is where the strict laws, the people who follow very strictly Orthodox, will do that. If a priest's daughter defiles herself by becoming a prostitute, she disgraces her father and must be burned by the fire. Wow. Think she'd walk to it? I think kicking and screaming, right? The woman he marries must be a virgin. He must not marry a widow, a divorced woman, or a woman defiled by prostitution, but only a virgin from his own people. Well, that's a strict one on that. In this day and time, it's very rare. The fact, I mean, I can say none of the people I have married could honestly sit there and say, have you been totally celibate? What? Kept your clothes on all times? Not done anything? The answer is usually no. It's very rare that someone can, in our days in the world today, that we see that. So we talk about this filing skin diseases. We get to those fun things. Then we have unacceptable sacrifices. You know, the priests are the ones responsible for sacrifices. What are they supposed to do? If you bring an animal to be sacrificed, it is supposed to be so-so, perfect, unblemished, right? It's supposed to be the best of your best. You know, that's what you're supposed to see. So, but do we see that, you know? You must present a male without defect from cattle, sheep, or goats in order that it may be accepted on your behalf. Do not bring anything with a defect, because it will not be accepted on your behalf. So they are saying, do not, this is important, do not allow that to take place. Do not offer the Lord, the blind, the injured, or the maimed, or anything with warts or festering running sores. Do not place any of these on the altar as a food offering presented to the Lord. So it's telling you exactly what you cannot do, and the priests are the ones in charge of ensuring if someone comes and brings an animal, Terry, you brought something up for sacrifice. If I was the priest, I'd have to look it all over and make sure it was the best. It was totally unblemished. Now we see that in two other places where this is important. We see in Genesis chapter 4 where that what did not take place, and in Malachi, we will see it again. Malachi is we'll get to Malachi real quick. In Genesis chapter 4, if you remember, Cain and Abel, right? Adam slept with his wife, Eve. Slept with Eve, his wife. She conceived and had Cain. As my Hebrew Bible professor, David Hodges, used to always say, they raised a little Cain. So, and he'd always laugh. So, but that's what, David used to always have fun with the Bible, with the wording, and sit there and say, here it is, look at that. And so I've gotten, I've gotten the man with God's help, and then she had another baby. She had Cain, and she had Abel. But you remember it in there, time passed, Cain brought an offering to God from the produce on his farm. Abel also brought an offering, but from the firstborn animals of his herd, choice cuts of meat. God liked Abel and his offering, but Cain and his offering didn't get his approval. Why? Abel brought the best of the best. He brought them the first. He brought the best of the best. Cain just grabbed some stuff, throw it in a basket and bring it. That's what that. He gave whatever his leftovers were basically to them. Now Malachi, we won't get that for a while. It is the last book in our Bible, in the Hebrew portion of our Bible. It's written about 430 BCE. And after this Malachi, there's a 400-year absence. This is the last thing. It'll be 400 years before we see Jesus Christ come into this world. That's that 400-year gap. So when we study that, we'll see 8 different issues. We're only going to look at 2. But this brings point about what the priests are supposed to do and what they may not do, and it also affects what we think about when we get to the New Testament. The Lord's love of Israel. I have always loved you, says the Lord. But they retort, really? Really? How have you loved us? This is not a happy response. And the Lord replies, this is how I showed my love for you. I loved your ancestor Jacob, but I rejected his brother Esau. Some translation says I hated his brother Esau. Does God hate? I think it's the struggle of the translation of the word that's being used, but it is the fact he did reject Esau. If you remember when Esau came back in the part, what happened to Esau and his family? They were all destroyed. Esau was coming to attack God's people rather than be with God's people. So on that. I turned Esau's inheritance in a desert of jackals. Then we get into issue 2 was the Lord of Heaven's army says to the priest, a son honors his father and a servant respects his master. If I am your father and master, where are the honor and respect I deserve? You have shown contempt for my name. How have they shown contempt? How have we done that? You have shown contempt by offering defiled sacrifices on my altar. Then you asked, how have we defiled the sacrifices? You defiled them by saying the altar of the Lord deserves no respect. When you give blind animals as sacrifices, isn't that wrong? What we learned before? No, you do not. And isn't it wrong to offer animals that are crippled and diseased? Try giving gifts like that to your governor and see how pleased he is. Says the Lord of the heaven's armies. Go ahead. Beg God to be merciful to you. But when you bring that kind of offering, why should he show you any favor at all? Asked the Lord of heaven's armies. How I wish one of you would shut the temple door so that these worthless sacrifices could not be offered. I am not pleased with you. We always think of what is Jesus? Why is he turning the tables over? When he goes to the temple courts, he's turning the tables over, right? He keeps turning them over. He turns them over. He's upset. He's angry. Because what happens in those temple court? we get to the very end here, we're seeing all the things you came to the temple for. There's all the sacred days you came. And you would come to Jerusalem, to the temple court, on Rosh Hashanah and other dates, etc., the Day of Atonement, etc., and you'd be bringing offerings to the Lord. So you're here, Jerusalem swells up to 1 million or more people coming there. And what happens when you go from 100,000 to 1 million? What happens to prices? You go to the shekel, you go to the temple courts, and you had to convert your Roman currency because it has pictures of Roman Caesars, etc., into shekels, into temple shekels, because you cannot you cannot bring an offering to God in the representation of another god. So you can't do that. So you bring in there and you come in and you got to come in there. And of course you're traveling, etc. So you got to stop by the mart outside. Hey, send offerings here. Burn offerings here. Come on by. Pick one out. And you walk up and you're sitting there. Everybody else is in line too. He's sitting there and he says, I'm a wealthy merchant. I need to buy a unblemished lamb or, bull or whatever. And they go, unblemished lamb. How much are they going for now? Oh, we got an unblemished lamb, $1,000. And you're going, I don't have enough for that. What do you have for a little less? Hey, George, what do we got for less than that? We got one back here. I got a little Mary over here. She limps a little bit. Has a little tore in her ear. We let her go for 500. And you're going, no, I can't afford that. And he's sitting there going, well, what do you got for $100? Well, I got one over here. I got a goat I can give you. Has 3 legs, missing one eye. We call him Lucky. But you have him for $100. These are priests selling to the priests, and they're bringing these into the offering. I always wondered what else was Jesus upset about. What are they doing in the temple courts that Jesus is turning the tables over? In fact, because that's what we're seeing, that the whole turn of the world upside down when Jesus comes. But you dishonor my name of your actions by bringing contemptible food, and you're saying it's all right to defile the Lord's table. And that's what they've been doing. And that's what they're doing 400 years before. You think they stopped it 400 years later. Cursed is the cheat who promises to give a fine ram from his flock, but then sacrifices a defective one to the Lord. For I am the great king, says the Lord of heaven's army, and my name is feared among the nations. I think our test tied that there's another very certain thing. Again, are we giving? Or do we give to God what we should give to God? Are we honest? Are we giving our leftovers? Are we doing what we're supposed to do? And that's the struggle we all deal with. So we're going to jump to the Jewish calendar. Now, last week I gave you a calendar in your handout. And if you're like me, I'm looking at it. It's hard to, inside of it is the Gregorian calendar. That's January, February, March, April, May. On the outside is the Jewish calendar and the Jewish names for their months. They do have months similar to the Gregorian, 30 days, 29 days, etc., etc. Their year, when I say Gregorian calendar, that's when we say 2024, that's 2024 years. What's supposed to be the birth of Christ at 0. And that's why we're counting down from 1435 down to 0 in the Bible. But for the Jewish, their calendar begins 1 year before creation. So I forgot what the year is. It's 5,000 something this year we're in right now. And the fact, so they've been counting down since the day of creation to now. So their calendar is counted differently, and their months are a little different than ours. And so that's what we see, that's what you see in that calendar. That's why so it is I have to ask someone every time to show me what day is it in the Gregorian. And I've had Jewish. I had one when I talked the other day up in Princeton, and it's like, what year is it? Let me hang on. I got to look it up. And he was, what are you doing? I'm Googling it. He says, I can't remember it either. It gets confusing because you live in the Gregorian calendar, and you got to go back and look and see what the rabbi said last week. What year is it? So we have the appointed festivals. I put on here, slow down to move too fast, because I have to remember this. God is leading his people, and he wants them to take time. We need to take time, right? We need to slow down. We need to relax. We rush. I'm blessed to be here because I rarely ever hear, well, you went 3 minutes over. But there's many churches, I have friends, if they go over 55 minutes, there is someone standing up doing this, saying you have gone too long. You cannot, they will not. You sit there going, wait a second, we're come to church and relax and be with God. And that's what God wants them to do. It says, spend time, relax. I will provide for you. And that. So the Lord is telling you, these are your appointed festivals. There are 6 days when you may work. Work as long as you want. Work as hard as you want. But the 7th day is a day of Sabbath rest. A day of sacred assembly. You're not to do any work, whether you live, it is a Sabbath to the, wherever you live, it is a Sabbath to the Lord. So no matter where you're at, slow down. Take that Sabbath day. We don't take that Sabbath day. There's probably, it's a rare person that would come directly here, turn around, go home, not turn their TV on, not turn their radio on, live a quiet day, a total rest, maybe have family over, and they just sit there and talk and relax and talk about how blessed they are. How often do we do that? And think of that. We don't do that anymore. So that's what God is wanting them to slow down and reflect and see what's going on and spend time with each other, not just time with God, with each other, and keep in connection with each other. It is hard. How many of us live in neighborhoods we never see our neighbors? They come into the house and go home. We don't even see each other anymore. The number one problem in America right now for the older generation is loneliness. That's why I say if you come to church, your life expectancy goes up 10 to 15 years because you have community. And that's what we all need. We need community. That's why God is saying you need community. You need to be with each other. You need to relax with each other. Take time. Slow down. The Passover festival, unleavened bread. These are the Lord's appointed festivals. The Lord's Passover begins at twilight on the 14th day of the first month. That's why I say you need the calendar to go back and look and see when that is. On the 15th day of that month, the Lord's festival, unleavened bread, begins. So we think of the Passover first. And what I put down the picture. What is the Passover in honor of? The last plague. The angel passed over those houses in which the blood has been placed over the lintel of the door. That was brought the exodus of the people. So it's the celebration of the exodus that God provided for his people. So that's what they do on that. Then we follow that with the Lord's festival, unleavened bread, and the offering of the first fruits. The Lord said to the Israelites, speak to the Israelites and say to them, when you enter the land I am going to give you and reap its harvest, bring to the priest a sheaf of first grain, and the first grain of your harvest. He is to wave the sheaf before the Lord so it's accepted on his behalf. Paul says Christ, the first fruits when he comes, those who belong to him. Jesus is our first fruit. He is the replacement for this. He is the first fruit offering, replacing that. So that's what you see there. It correlates over to that. The festival of 7 weeks. From the day of the Sabbath, the day you brought the sheaf of the wave offering, count off seven full weeks. When we come to Ash Wednesday, we're counting weeks off, right? I think it's 7. We come to that. But after Easter, how many weeks before we get to Pentecost? 7 weeks. What does Pentecost mean? 50 days. So our Pentecost is like their Pentecost. In fact, it doesn't mean the exact same thing. For them, it remembers the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. For us, it's the birth of the church. Count off 50 days and present an offering of new grain to them. From wherever you live, bring 2 loaves made of 2/10 of the ephah, that tells you specifically what you're supposed to bring. The Lord presented with his bread. We go on to that. The festival of trumpets. The Lord said to Moses, say to the Israelites, on the first day of the 7th month, you are to have a day of Sabbath rest, a sacred assembly commemorated with trumpet blasts. Do no regular work, but present a food offering to the Lord. This is the beginning of the Jewish year. The Rosh Hashanah, and I've already wrote it down there, but I ask you, what is the trumpet blast? Blowing the ram's horn. Where did they learn to do that? What did Abraham do to Isaac? In the sacrifice, the ram was caught in the thicket. Replaced Isaac. That was the sacrifice. The ram's horn is blown. So it's a remembrance of all that. So that's the tradition. It's no different than the traditions that we have, the things that we do for ourselves. Rosh Hashanah, you learned last week again. I talked to you about is that you have Rosh Hashanah, then it follows right back on the 10th day of the 7th month, the Day of Atonement. You hold a sacred assembly. You deny yourselves. It's Yom Kippur. What I forgot to say about the Passover, I want to jump back before I go any further in this. Holy Week, on Maundy, Thursday, what is that? It's the Passover. It's in honor of the Passover. Well, it leads up to the Sabbath day in which Jesus descends. The Sabbath begins on Friday night through Saturday morning, Saturday at sunset. From that, we have Passover, and then we see Jesus descend into hell. And then on Sunday morning is that. But that's, Passover sometimes coincides exactly of Easter. Sometimes it's the week or more off from Easter, but it's tying to the same date time frame. It just gets moved around a little bit from how we count it from the solstice and how they count it on their calendar. But it's all sort of in the same time frame we see that. The Day of Atonement, we've learned about that's the most important day. It's the 10th day of the 7th month. You hold a sacred assembly, deny yourselves, and you present a food offering to the Lord. Do not do any work on that day because it's the Day of the Atonement, when atonement is made for you before the Lord. What is the atonement for? It's for the sins of the people for the previous year. The priests are bringing the whole act of the offering, etc. The chief priest is going in before God in behind the curtain into the Holy of Holies, and will make the sacrifices and make the offering for the sin of the people for the last year. It's a very holy day. It's a day in which you deny yourselves. You must deny yourselves from the evening, the 9th day of the month, until the following evening you are to observe the Sabbath. In Christianity, we call this a black fast. It is a day in which you cannot eat, you cannot drink, and there's no sexual relations. It's very specific. It is nothing to be it is a day in which you totally fast 100%. In Christianity, we're coming up on Ash Wednesday. This is the only fast ordered by God. In Christian circles, do we fast? Do you have any friends who have ever done a 40? I've had friends do 40-day fast. I've had people that fast, etc. It's not a required thing by God. It's something we do in honor of God. Fasting can also be the fact that you're honoring and doing this and not eating anything. Some people will not eat or drink. Anymore, we tell people to drink because they can hurt themselves. They don't know what they're doing. But it's also, fasting is also giving up. Giving up a behavior, a way of doing that. If you give it up for 40 days, you tend to overcome something. I'm going to quit using bad language or something. I'm not going to say this word ever again. And you live it every day and say, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to speak ugly of this or do that. You start living that. It becomes a routine, becomes part of your life, and it helps you get over that. And you say, I'm going to honor God by being better in what I do. I'm going to do what he's saying. Love thy neighbor as thyself. I'm not going to, whatever. You're going to give up. So think about that. The Festival of Tabernacles, I always think about this when I read this. The Festival of Tabernacles is on the 15th day of the 7th month of the Lord. Today, it's the festival in which they commemorate the wanderings in the wilderness for 40 years under Moses. This is at the very beginning. Do they know that this is what's going to happen? That they're going to wander for 40 years? But that God has instructed, here's the Festival of Tabernacles. I think be recognized. This is what they celebrate today when they do it. They're remembering that 40 years of wandering. So these are the Lord's appointed festivals, which you are to proclaim as sacred assemblies for bringing food offerings to the Lord, the burnt offerings and grain offerings, sacrifices and drink offerings required for each day. These offerings are in addition to the Lord's Sabbath, in addition to your gifts and whatever you have vowed, and all the free will offerings you give to the Lord. So these are all the different things. This is the calendar events. And now we're going to see this go into more detail as we go along. We'll see these keep reappear, and they'll talk about them, and we'll see. So you know what they are. And so that's, hang on to this, that worksheet, and you'll know, be able to refer back to it. Oh, what's this offering, and what's that offering, and what that is. We're going to jump. I'm not going to go into the detail of these other ones, etc. We read those, and they are kind of numbing in the fact of you're reading all the things you cannot do, blah, 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 and all that, and it's the stiff penalties, etc., that are there, and the fact. So that's your understanding how God is now leading them, taking a people who did not know God, because they did not know God, and they're starting to know God. God gave them the 10 principles. Now it's like, well, you've gotten those. Now we're going to tell you we're going to tell you more detail of how to live your life and into those. And as we go further, we'll see in Deuteronomy, etc., the fences begin to be built even further around the 613 laws, that they will get more detail. Do not boil a goat in his mother's milk, etc. Those kind of things. Laws. So fences will start going up. And by the time Christ comes, the Talmud, etc., there's over 10,000 laws. So the Pharisee and the legal scholars at that time, could you imagine that? I think a law library we see in a lawyer's office, it must have had to have one of those in there. But they had to memorize all those 10, who is a specialist in knowing what work is, what work is. And there's so many things of what define what work is. It just goes on for pages and pages and pages if you ever want to go read that. So we end. In fact, it's pretty much the same at the beginning. My last line is wrong. It should be we've learned how to implement the law. It's all the way up through the end. So it is, as we begin, you're going to go into Numbers now. And you have to do like I do. I have a hard time pronouncing all those names unless I have a book there to tell me to pronounce them. It's sort of, you can just go along as the family, the family of Dan. Okay, there's that guy's name. There's this guy's name. But go through it. That you can, like I do most of the time. I use someone reading it to me as I go through it, because help me to pronounce all those names, and I have to back up a lot of times to say, how do you say this? How do you say this? How do you say it? And then I have to know that when they say it, it's a different. There are multiple interpretations how we pronounce these words. We have some standardized ones that because it's tradition, it says it's this way, but we have no clue. This is a lost language. We're making suppose. With that, any questions? Let's say a prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful for your presence. We're thankful for the blessings you have. And Lord, we seek to open our eyes and ears as we continue to read, but also to see around us, to see and begin to understand again when Paul talks about in Romans what it is to live by the law is to die by it. Where Jesus tells us in the Beatitudes, if we're going to live by the law, Jesus came to fulfill the law. If we're going to live by it, we got to live it. We got to live better than the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, to not make any errors at all. If not, we condemn ourselves. Lord, open what it is for us to walk with your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. And Lord, continue to bless us in this journey. We ask all this through your Son, Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.